All right. So the recording is working. Hello, everybody. Thank you for everybody who joined. And I know that many people requested and said that they can't join today, and they requested the recording. So I'm sure a lot of people will watch this recording. And thank you very much, Andy, for joining us today.
My
So
pleasure. Thank you.
I will start with an introduction. But before the introduction, I wanted to say, first of all, that we were supposed to have a moderator today with me, Jen, and unfortunately, she just called me and mentioned that she has a personal medical family issue or emergency, so she won't be able to moderate. But I'm hoping that everybody in her family, everybody's safe and good. That's the most important thing, health. So it will be a conversation one-on-one today with Andy. And thank you again for everybody who joined. Remember that if you have questions, and I'm sure that there's going to be many questions, you can see in the bottom of the screen, there's a section of Q&A. So just basically drop your questions and I'll try to get to them throughout the session. So my name is Yair and I have nothing to do with education of children. I'm an adult cardiologist. And in fact, I think that the introduction is kind of important because we often talk in these webinars about issues related to technology, such as phones in schools, education technology, iPads in schools, Chromebooks, etc. And one of the important things that we always comment when we start these webinars or two different things. The first of them is that these are just education sessions. We want to learn more about it from the experts. And that's why we had teachers, authors, psychologists, physicians, researchers explaining the data and learning more about technology, digital devices, and children. This is not about judging anybody. And sometimes there's a thought that, we're basically saying, oh, I don't even know where my phone is now, but that people are saying that we're saying, no, you should not be giving your kid a cell phone or in school or no iPads. Every family is different. And we're just here to basically expose people and educate. So that's the first thing. The second thing is that in my profession, people think that this is like all these conversations that are more of like a, technology, anti-technology cult, but it really isn't. Like I'm a physician myself, but just in the last few weeks, including yesterday, I gave big talks about AI, technology, and medicine, and specifically cardiology. So I'm a big believer. I work for companies that are, consulting for companies that are doing healthcare and AI. And I think that maybe because of this, I think that technology is really important, but sometimes we need to know when not to use it, including in our children. So that's kind of like the introduction of what I wanted to tell you. And now we're going to start today with a special type of a session or webinars. Each webinar is going to last between 60 minutes and 75 minutes with a max or a hard stop at 75 minutes. And we have had so many conversations about phones in schools. But what I feel that is happening is that the conversations that initially a year ago or so started focusing on phones, wait until 8th, etc., is now recently shifting. And in the last few months, especially, we're hearing more and more about what is education technology? What are devices? Can we opt in? Can we opt out? What's the benefits? What's the potential harms? And because of this, we decided to have a series of webinars, of at least 5 webinars, specifically talking about education technology or Chromebooks, etc., in school. So for this session, we're really, really lucky to have Andrew Liddell, who actually, along with his wife, Julie, is a co-founder of the EdTech Law Center, which is a consumer protection law firm in Austin, Texas. He's from all over, like you were telling me. But this firm solves problems where school meets technology. He was first an activist, and now as a lawyer, Andrew has worked to advance the cause of youth, digital, civil rights since 2019, so about 6 years or so. So maybe, Andy, as the first question, maybe tell us a little bit about what led you to this specific niche. We don't see a lot of people who are specifically focusing on education technology. How did you get into it? How did you become interested?
So it goes back to 2017 or so. My wife Julie and I met in law school. I practiced as a patent attorney doing intellectual property law for a number of years before I started the firm. My wife Julie served the state of Texas as a public servant for most of her career, working for the appellate courts at the highest levels of the state of Texas. Toward the end of her time in public service, she was asked to help start the Judicial Commission on Mental Health, which was a joint project. Texas, we have two Supreme Courts, a civil and a criminal Supreme Court, and they're trying to improve mentally ill Texans' access to justice in the courts. And so Julie was asked to help start this initiative. As part of that, in 2017, she went to a bunch of conferences, and in these early days, this is almost 10 years ago now, was exposed to the early literature, basically linking time on screen to declining mental health outcomes, at least showing a correlation, right? Not necessarily causation, but correlation. We also had young kids at the time. So my daughter was very young. My son had just been born. And this combined with our personal experience of watching our kids, how differently our daughter, who was pretty, chill and mild mannered, how differently she acted if we just gave her a little bit of access to, what we thought of as the phone, right? Watching, Mickey Mouse videos on the phone on a plane trip for a couple of hours. Well, she was obsessed with the phone for weeks after. So we just decided with those two things, it's like, well, more than anything, this just is a crummy parenting experience. And so we were really just decided, look, our kids are going to have an iPad. They're not going to have phones. We're not going to watch stuff on the phones with them. Anything we do, we're going to watch together on TV, but we're not going to be doing this. And so our kids were in this, very tech light, no tech preschool, kind of Montessori adjacent preschool. And then she was getting ready to go into kindergarten, and news broke here in Austin that in like the wealthy district next door to ours, this first grade boy on his school iPad during the school day on the school network for weeks had been served pornography in class. And the parents had spoken out, and there's this big uproar. And so we were shocked that this was even possible. It's like, why are they giving first graders iPads anyway? Much less, how is this even happening? And so to kind of educate ourselves, we went to the school board meeting and wound up meeting the parents of the boy and finding out through our work with them and some of the original people involved with Wait Until 8th, who started here in the Austin area, that what had happened to that kid was not rare. What was rare was that his parents spoke out about it. And the district, although they made a really good show of listening to parents behind the scenes, were retaliating and basically saying, EdTech is here to stay, and you can either take it or leave it. You can go somewhere else if you don't like it. And this is public school. You have a right to public education. You have a legal obligation to send your kids there. And even though this is a wealthy district, not everybody is like that. Not everybody has the choice to opt out and go to a private school if they feel like it. And so this family was asking us for legal help. Like, can you help us find attorneys? Because we couldn't help them at the time because we were doing different stuff. And so I got involved in this cause through my failed attempts to try and help that family. They ended up being forced out of the district. I never found them legal help. I still am very upset about it to this day. And so that's what got me involved in this great grassroots initiative called Fair Play for Kids. And they've been, originally we're the campaign for commercial-free childhood, and they've been this great grassroots movement that's been very aware of the commercialization of childhood in the United States, starting with, sugar cereal and cartoons that were basically advertisements for toys, which sounds quaint now, all the way up to now where we've got these, manipulative, addictive, destructive social media apps and algorithms and ed tech. And so through my advocacy and activism within the Fair Play umbrella, the same stories kept coming up over and over and over again. I mean, every month was the same story of that same, same family, same little boy over and over again. And after hearing that enough times, Julie and I really put our heads together and thought, well, this really is, worthy of the courts. There are legal wrongs that are happening. There are legal rights that can be vindicated in the courts. And, in your introduction, I see this as a civil rights movement, right? I mean, I think kids have a civil right to an education, and they have a civil right not to be data mined for profit by corporate America. They have a civil right not to have these manipulative design practices used against them without their knowledge and consent. And so, like any good civil rights movement, they needed a legal arm. And so that's kind of why we started the firm, how we think of ourselves, is vindicating these rights of people who, for whatever reason, are unable to do it if we weren't in the picture.
Thank you for that. So I think that my first question to you after this introduction is what I'm hearing from a lot of parents and also educators because I'm interested in opting out. I have two young kids, and I would like him to be one of them in K already opted out. But it's really difficult when you're alone in this, and there's very few people who are with you because if you have a third grade who are definitely more so in middle school, and they're the only one that needs a special program that is not through the Chromebooks, it's very, very, very difficult to do. So I personally have reached out to different neighbors and friends of mine in the grade of my children, and even teachers. And my question to you is this: the vast majority of people that I've spoken with, they believe that it's okay. Yes, there's risks, access to YouTube, privacy, data mining, and trust me, we will talk about this throughout this next hour. But my first question is, many of them feel that it's okay. This is just how the world is. We need to be familiar with technology. Technology, maybe AI in the future is going to be part of our life. There's benefits of having a Chromebook. You're doing your math instead of everybody in different level listening to the teacher, some falling behind, some in advance. You have an option for personalized education to yourself. I mean, it sounds really good. So what do you say? Let's say that I'm sure that the parents who are watching us, most of them believe that they want to learn more about opting out and that educational, they think that educational technology has disadvantages. But maybe you can explain to parents who would like to watch this or are watching this who don't know, what should they know about the potential? Like, is it true that it has benefits? And maybe start talking about the harms as well.
Sure. So the benefits are few and far between, and the studies that tend to show benefits tend to be industry funded, and conducted in a laboratory environment. But I think what people would be shocked to learn is that there is basically no vetting of efficacy before any of this was adopted, and yeah, I don't know how familiar people are with the social media lawsuits that are happening, but those lawsuits, they're about 4 years ahead of where we are right now. And in the course of those lawsuits, YouTube is one of the platforms that has been accused of wrongdoing, trying to addict kids. Google owns YouTube. Well, now it's all under Alphabet, but the point is it's all the same kind of affiliated companies. And through the course of this, it's come out that YouTube executives were trying to get more YouTube in school to get more kids watching YouTube. They viewed the 80 million hour gap between any given Thursday when kids were in school and any given Saturday when kids weren't in school, 80 million hour delta of YouTube viewership as a problem to be solved, and Chromebooks as a vector for solving that problem. And so what I think people need to understand is there is this whole industry whose cynicism cannot be overstated, that is taking advantage of the trust we place in schools and our desire as parents to prepare our kids for the future to push things into schools that serve their bottom line. And they don't serve kids' well-being. They don't help kids learn. They don't keep them safe. They don't keep them on task. And so I think starting there, which is every single thing in the school, except for the computer, is subject to this whole very rigorous framework of vetting, right? Whether it's the physical products that are there, and we have 125 years more or less of consumer product safety law going back to the jungle and Upton Sinclair, all the way to curriculum adoption, which is done in public with the input of experts, but also with the input of members of the public. And then ultimately, the school district gets to choose from a menu of vetted curricula. There is nothing like that with EdTech. There's nothing like that with EdTech. And so I agree. I'm not a technophobe. I'm not against educating kids about technology. The problem is this isn't that. Putting kids next to computers for their childhood does not help them learn more about computers, especially when those computers are mostly there just to get them to screw around the internet, because that's how companies make money now, is following you around online and observing your behavior online. And so starting there with the fact that no one has sat down with what do kids need to learn and what would a computer look like in order to achieve those needs, nobody has done that. They've instead sat down with a product that has failed to find any other market and a willing receptacle for that in our nation's public schools in order to force this into that market and then bring on new users who were formerly outside of the ecosystem. And so I hate to say it's that cynical and that simple, but I've seen some of these public documents, and I can only wait to see what's what's yet to come. Um, Google is not there to make sure your kid is smart or succeeds in life. Google is there to protect its bottom line. So that is the place where I would start. And then we can certainly talk about, beneficial uses or possible ways to use technology in school that would be better for kids.
Yeah, I mean, I remember that when I was younger many years ago, and other people, my wife as well, and others, basically we used computers, but in a way, we learned coding, we learned this and that, we had computer labs, but we didn't use it as a mean to study. We weren't on it most of the time. So maybe we'll start touching because I'm listening to you. And since you mentioned several potential problems with using the Chromebooks and the iPads. You started by talking about what led you to all of this, which is a family of a child who was on iPads, but he was like exposed to nonstop pornography. So I think that maybe one risk or one issue that you can talk about is inappropriate content. And you would believe, or I would believe, that the schools, the iPads, would only allow certain apps to work. But from what I hear, we don't have any kids in middle school, but from what I hear, it's very, and I would love to hear your opinion about this. It's very easy for children, especially middle school and high school, to find a way to funnel or bypass the specific apps and to open a browser, open whatever, and go to YouTube and watch whatever, scary content, sometimes violent content or pornography. So that's one issue. You also talked a little bit about data mining or mining information, privacy, learning more and more about the children. So I want you to tell us more a little bit about it. Is it dangerous? Like, who cares if it knows if my daughter is this age or that age, or if she likes this math or that math? So maybe tell us about why it's considered by so many a problem to use this education technology.
Okay, yeah, well, let's talk about both those things. Let's talk about kind of the content piece first, and then the data mining and privacy piece second. So the content piece first is, the marketing behind these tools makes it sound like the magic textbook, right? You go into English class and it's got your English lesson right there, and then you take it from English and you go to math class and you got your math lesson right there. It's all personalized to you. It knows where you are. It's there to support you. That's not what it's like at all. This is not the magic textbook. This is the gateway to the internet. And so if we had the magic textbook, I wouldn't be here. I wouldn't be in business. That's kind of my goal with these lawsuits, is to get companies to sit down. It's like, if we are going to have technology in schools, let's design it to be fit for purpose. Let's design it to meet the educational needs of kids, in our country and around the world. And so, documents have come out, again, publicly, not through any lawsuit I've been involved with, showing that Google's engineers have known for 8 years now that I think that may not be a right number, but they've known for many years that the safeguards that they build, that they try and allow school officials, the school IT guy, to lock down the Chromebooks, which everyone thinks are locked down, are, in their words, trivially easy to bypass. They've known that for years and years and years, and they have not bothered to fix it because it's not a priority to them at best. And this is, again, based on a couple of public documents that have already come out. Who knows? It's possible that they didn't bother to fix it, not only because very few people were complaining, but because they actually want kids to be on the internet, right? Because that's, again, how Google makes money, is through just kind of the traffic through its browsers and through its search. And so, when they know it's trivially easy to bypass, when they know that kids are, watching, again, not a random example, Will Ferrell videos as opposed to their math lessons, or Google internal documents that are publicly available, they're not there to help your kids. And so they're not there to keep these things locked down. And so anyone who thinks that, oh, it comes from school, it's safe, you're right to think that, because most things are and historically have been, but this isn't. This isn't. And so I think what parents need to be aware of is, you have to assume that the Chromebook or the iPad that comes home from school is an open portal to the internet, and that the worst things that can happen to a kid on the internet can happen to your kid on the Chromebook. We represent families who have had very, very bad things happen to their kids. And I've been in touch with law enforcement and others where even worse things have happened to kids. And so if you can imagine, a stranger with designs on a child going after them in an environment that the stranger knows is totally unguarded, what horrible things can happen to kids. Those things do happen, and they happen through and on and because of kids' school computers, in part because parents think they're safe, which is because of the messaging behind this stuff. And so, if you're a parent, don't let your kid take the Chromebook in their bedroom alone at night. Don't, keep an eye on them. And that's a huge burden to a lot of parents and a huge problem. One of the reasons that, we're so motivated here is that I know that most parents don't have that wherewithal. I don't. And it's like I'm here at my office still, and it's like my kids are home tonight. So it's like they would have to be, it would be very difficult for them to do their work on a Chromebook if that was the world we had to live in. And so that's the danger piece. The data mining piece is more diffuse, but also kind of more problematic, or as problematic, right? Because these cases of kids being contacted by predators, kids being forced into self-harm, kids suffering AI psychosis, those are very, very grave cases, but you know percentage-wise, they affect a very small percentage of people, right? And so it's like I'm not here to say that your kid is 50% likely to be contacted by a stranger on their Chromebook. They're probably not, but tell that to the parents whose kids were. It is something that is still horrible when it does happen to your kid, and it's something that should have a 0% chance of happening if these things were designed properly. The data mining piece affects everybody, and that's something where again we don't exactly know how much is being collected or how it's being used, right? But we do know through these companies' terms of service that they claim extraordinary power to take and use whatever they want, however they want. And so some terms of service I've looked at say that they can take kids' images and voices and modify them and use them in their own products. We've got AI training on kids. Then we've got these prediction markets, which is really what advertising is. And so if you think about it beyond just the scope of advertising, about how valuable a prediction of your future behavior might be, that can affect your life chances in real ways, right? And so we've got, again, anecdotal, but I think persuasive evidence of, for example, certain kids at certain schools applying to college. And depending on what zip code your school is in or what zip code you are in, where you live, you will either be flooded with ads for, Ivy League or liberal arts schools in the Northeast, or you will get things that are presented just like those, but they're for-profit colleges, right? Things that are diploma mills that cost a fortune, that accept, federal student aid, but that don't get you a degree that's worth anything. And all of that data comes from somewhere. That comes from your school, your school information system. And so just like we have rights to our credit report, this is like a credit report, but it's so much more vast and deep, and we have no insight into it at all. And so that's another problem where when people say, well, if I've got nothing to hide, I'm not doing anything wrong, who cares? You don't really understand the depth of the problem, which is it's not about whether you're doing anything wrong or not. But first of all, you don't get to decide whether what you're doing is wrong or not, and that can change over time. But it's about what opportunities are being made available to you or your kids, what opportunities are being denied to you or your kids, and the total opacity with which that happens that I think is wrong. And so there's been there's been reporting over the years on different services, but the one that was the most egregious to me was one of these student information systems that purported to help kids apply to college and find the right college match. But then you come to find out that on the other side of that, the colleges were paying for placement, and they were paying to target kids of certain races and ethnicities for their programs. And so some very, very prominent state schools, land-grant schools, schools that are meant to uplift and help everybody, were denying ads and scholarship opportunities to everybody but mediocre white guys, because they wanted those guys for their engineering program, because they thought those guys would come into it. And I just think that type of denial of opportunity to people is really wrong and offensive, and especially when it's happening totally out of sight where you're not even aware of it.
I have a lot of follow-up questions because
I
it's
bet.
so interesting. But you know, Andy, one of the things is that I'd like to use the time with you, given your, your experience and your knowledge, because there's a lot more to talk about education technology, about the potential harms, and that's why we're going to have a series, including bringing Emily Cherkin and Dr. Jared Horvath and Michael McLeod and educators and Randy to really learn more. Because, for example, what many people are talking about is the importance of children still having this connection and writing. And when you're doing the mathematics, I remember when I was in high school and I was doing difficult calculations, I wrote and wrote, and then I marked it with an X, and I thought again. And when you do it only online, so there's a lot of different things that I will not discuss with you because I'm going to save it to the next talks. But I want to talk to you about things that are maybe more related to legal. So I think a question that I have is like, there's much more to say. We know that educational technology, Chromebooks, iPads, all that could be harmful, and especially certain apps, and especially the lack of supervision. Yet you go to public schools and to school districts, and you don't feel that they have the same approach that you do. They are often blindly working with certain apps. In my school districts, for example, there's an organization that they don't vet themselves, but they use apps that are vetted by an organization called ISTE. You probably are familiar with it. I don't remember what it stands for, but they say this is fine. So the issue is this: we as parents who are trusting our kids to the school district, we know or we believe that they are taking care of us, and we rely on them 100%. The school, leadership, those people who are paying the money and choosing the apps are relying on ISTE, for example, or other large umbrella organization that are deciding and vetting the apps for them. What do you think about this mechanism? I mean, none of us think that superintendents and teachers and educators, they want something, they're greedy and they're getting money from it. So we don't think that this is a conspiracy theory. So what's going on like in the system?
Well, I think this is about resources, and I think it's about concerns for the future. And so I think that I like you. I want to believe the best in these people, right? It's like I don't think it's a conspiracy. I don't think that people are out to make bad decisions that are going to hurt kids. I think that there's a lot of people, that are about our age, 40s, 50s, who grew up with the promise of the internet being this great thing, this great connector and unlocker of knowledge and potential that it may have been for a little bit, but it isn't anymore. And so I think there's some idealism there and some inability to kind of contend with what the internet has actually become. That's a problem. I think it's a problem of resources. It's much easier, and I hear this when I talk to folks who work in the school systems. It's much easier to pass a bond to buy more computers than it is to find a way to raise property taxes and pay your teachers better. And so the way we fund schools, how we prioritize schools in this country, it's all a huge problem. And so, when you hear the classroom teacher talking about how the EdTech platform makes her job grading papers so much easier because it's just automatically done because it's automatically scored. Well, I'm sympathetic to that. Like that actually is a huge, labor saver for that teacher. But then what's the cost of that, right? Because then that teacher is also the labor that she's saving grading papers is minding everybody's business when they're on their Chromebook, right? Trying to keep kids on task, fighting against this distracting pull of the computer. And I would say, well, let's find other ways to meet those needs. Let's find ways to support the material needs of our teachers, with smaller class sizes and better pay and more respect as a profession, things that computers and tools can't solve. And so I see this as kind of a band-aid on a problem, and this kind of shared ideology that we've had for 25 years of kind of the metricization and the testing culture, right? Where we have, I think, really deformed public education by obsession with testing and this idea that every kid needs to be tested. It's I'm not breaking any new ground here. That it's totally changed how we do public school. that we are now teaching to the test, that we're incentivizing teachers to teach to the test. When you tie their performance and their compensation to how well kids do on a test, then that's the only thing that they care about, right? Because it's the only thing they're incentivized to care about. And I think school should be a much richer environment than that, right? It's a place where kids should have friends and be around adults that care for them, and in this trusted environment where they can develop and grow and be nurtured, and not just kind of ground through this machine that the outcome is standardized tests. So there's a lot of issues kind of at play, but it's not. I'll tell you this much: it's not teachers' fault. Full stop. It's not teachers' fault, and it's not. It doesn't lay at the feet of any one political party, and it's not a new problem. These are things that have happened over the past 2.5 decades or more. It doesn't matter, who's in the White House, who's in Congress. Those things have continued, and I think we've just kind of lost sight of what school could be and what it should be. And I'm hoping that we can, reclaim some of that and have, teaching be this dignified profession on par with, a doctor or a lawyer or an engineer. I mean, they are a professional like any of those professions are. But unfortunately, because everybody has gone to school, everybody thinks they're qualified to talk about school, and everybody has an opinion on school in a way they may not with, heart surgery or, the law or mechanical engineering in my case. So it's a challenge for sure.
So I wanted to jump a little bit into more specifics, and I'm mindful that there's several questions, and I promise we're going to get to the questions. Several issues that are more related to law. And I think the first question that I have for you is more about opting in or opting out. And, when I was talking to you and talking to other people who are interested in the whole field of education technology, it kind of made me feel a little bit, if I take it as a parallel to my field, about, let's say, certain medications. Like as a cardiologist, I use statin like water. Everybody should be on statin. Anybody who has diabetes, whatever. Statin is a great drug. It works well. And again, I'm just giving it as an example. And it's like one day somebody will come, a new company, a powerful entity, whatever, and they will say, no, this is, at this point, it's not the standard of care. We are starting a new medication that is called something else, works completely differently. Why? Because we say that it's okay. There's no clear evidence that it works. There's harms. And there's all the data that we do have actually supports that it's worse than statin therapy. And yet it's because of entities or whatever. That's how it is. And I feel that in many ways, that's what happened, because previously we didn't have the ed technology and the Chromebooks. Maybe with COVID, it started like hitting harder, but it's now the default, meaning that you go to school, at least in my schools, the public schools, you are not asked. I do have a form that I did have to sign if I'm okay with allowing the kid to go back with a Chromebook and take it to home. But I don't even have, and I said, no, I'm not interested in taking it at home. And yet, despite that, we have, for example, snow days in my district that are mandatory to do virtual. And it's almost like a discrepancy. Like I was asking them and they didn't really know the answer to this. But what I'm saying is that you would expect the new technology to have the option of, I'm interested, I'll try it, to opt in. But rather than this, we are all opted in without giving consent. And the process of opting out is nearly impossible. Like when I was asking for my kindergarten child not to have I felt bad. I felt bad asking other parents. It was like the out of the norm. The norm is just do whatever is needed to do. So maybe tell us about in public schools or other schools, when you have Chromebooks, when you have iPads, when you have education technology, is it okay to ask to opt out? It's a long question, I know.
Yeah, well, you think about the norms in school. I mean, we used to have smoking lounges for students, right? Like there's a lot of things we used to do at school that we don't do anymore. We used to not have background checks for teachers and coaches and stuff, right? So like, there's a lot of things we've done to improve the safety of students at school. And so, yeah, of course, it's okay. It's okay to ask. I think I want to set people's expectations, though. So you have legal rights, and they still exist, even if they're not being recognized or respected. And the school environment is going to be one of those places. And so you asking to opt out is very unlikely to be met with success. It's not worth. I'm saying it's not saying it's not worth trying. It is worth trying, but a successful way to do it will be to do it in a group and to do it as a collective and not just one parent at a time, because those parents can be isolated and viewed as kind of problems. And also, you're the exception that the teacher has to teach to, as opposed to if you do it on a class-wide basis. Well, this is the baseline. This is how the class feels about it. So just deliver us education on paper, all together. You don't have to make exceptions for that. And so we can talk about those strategies, but this is where the data privacy piece kind of comes back and becomes really important, which is you do have rights about what companies collect about your kids on the internet, right? They are minors, and all of their consent originates with you until the kid is 18 under the law. So kids can't enter into contracts. They can't agree to have things taken from them, have their data mined from them. And schools can't either, right? And so schools really are not able to substitute their judgment for that of parents with respect to a company deciding to take data from a kid. And so this is where the data privacy lawsuits that we're bringing really come into play, which is, when parents say, I don't consent to this company developing a psychological profile of my kid through their interaction with these different EdTech products. Well, does it mean that they don't get the computer? Maybe. Does it mean that they don't have the back end, school system sucking information about them? Maybe. But it's a way to throw sand in the gears. It's a way to stand up and say, I do have a legal right to withhold my consent here in a way that really is, more effective and more recognized. Computers occupy this weird space where, they're not curriculum, right? But they are happening at school. And so, and they haven't really been tested either. We really haven't had the lawsuits around computers at school like we have a lot of other things, and so going all the way back to, there's a whole host of cases kind of in the 50s and 60s around civil rights, obviously, but also things like standing for the Pledge of Allegiance, right? Do you have to do that? And, this is a time of very, the second Red Scare, right? And there were these kids who were saying, well, my religious beliefs say I can't pledge allegiance to the flag. That's idolatry under my religious views. And the school was saying, no, you have to do that anyway. And the family sued the school district and ended up winning legal recognition for their religious rights, that they actually don't have to do that at school. And you go on down the line about, can you make every kid take a drug test? Can you search every kid's locker? Can you search every kid's backpack? And the only reason that the answer to that was no, 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 was that families stood up and exercised their legal rights against the school district. And so, unfortunately, for things like this, that's what it's going to take. There's going to have to be parents who sign up to sue their school district to say that this is infringing on my kid's rights or my rights to parent or both. And if you think about what these computers are and the material that is on them, those rights are abundant, right? And so there's a group of students in Kansas, in Lawrence, Kansas, who have iPads or Chromebooks at school. And the school put this monitoring software on the Chromebooks that's designed to, as marketed anyway, to prevent school shootings, to prevent self-harm, prevent drug dealing, whatever. But the upshot is it's total surveillance of every single thing a kid does on the computer that the school gets a record of. Well, these kids they work for the school newspaper. They volunteered. And as student journalists, they had the very, correct view that we have sources to protect and we have a First Amendment freedom of the press. And so if the school is going to observe every single thing we do in our school issued computer, then they're violating our press freedoms under the First Amendment. And so they sued their school district to say, stop using this platform. And they won. The school district, they didn't have to go to trial or anything. The school district agreed to stop using that platform, at least as to the kids in that class, right? And so all that to say, there are a lot of things wrong with this environment. When you as a parent raise your kid without a lot of internet, and they go to school and they're on YouTube all day, Well, you have a 14th Amendment right to parent your kid the way that you want within reason. And if your kid is being exposed to distracting content that's causing issues with their ADHD, for example, or if it's very violent content that's not age appropriate, sexual content that's not appropriate, things that you just don't want your kid exposed to at school and they wouldn't be exposed to in your own home. Well, you have rights to vindicate there. But they're not going to be respected just by asking nicely. And I say that only because I've been doing this for 8 years. Like, I wish that it was just a simple case of saying, look at all this bad stuff that can happen, is happening, is against my family values, and is violating my kids' constitutional rights. And school leadership would say, of course, we'll change. That has not been my experience by and large. And so, so the courts are one way, and the other way is running for school board and getting active, because these are democratic institutions that are supposed to respond democratically. And if there are enough people feeling this way, then that's a platform to run on, or that's a way to convince the incumbents that they should change their views on technology and listen to their constituents. And so, yeah, I guess all that to say, there are things you can do. You can ask, expect to be told no, but it doesn't end there necessarily.
And you're saying that one of the simple ways to do it is, other than going to the school board or becoming a school board member or trying to, is to create maybe sort of a coalition of parents. Because if you have more parents in the same grade in the same school who are interested in opting out, it may be easier to do, perhaps in one specific class. There's a question that is kind of a follow-up question to what you were just mentioning by an anonymous attendee. And he was talking about, let's say that the parent decides does not give permission to the school to issue a device, Chromebook, iPad, MacBook. But there's no specific device opt-out policy, and they still want to do so. So is there any legal obligation that the public school district, if it's a public school district, is required to provide high quality alternative learning opportunities? So, in the case of my school, we have heard from several people in the school district that they truly believe that without education technology, the level of education will drop, and they cannot commit to the same level of education with pen and paper. So can I ask, as a member of the public school district, to opt out and ask for high quality pen and paper traditional teaching? And they're supposed to say yes, or what are the laws about this?
So it hasn't been tested. You have a right to, and I would say that this is a winner in court. Based on the kind of recent education lawsuits that have come up to the Supreme Court, this is one that would win. You have a 14th Amendment right to parent how you wish. And if your parenting values are that I don't want my kid on a computer for whatever reason, but especially if they're good reasons, like they're dangerous, the school district doesn't control it, my kid is off task, my kid has an attention issue, my kid has autism, whatever it is, those are all reasons that the school should respect. And just think about other comparators of, say your family is vegetarian for religious reasons or not. It wouldn't matter. But you went to school and the school was like, look, you're not getting crucial vitamins and minerals without eating meat. And it's bad for your kid. And we know better. And we're going to make your kid eat meat while they're at school because they're being deprived of something. No judge on the planet would let that stand. Right, because that is infringing on your rights to raise your family the way that you wish to. This is not far removed from that at all. The challenge is no one's brought that lawsuit yet, right? And so we don't have anything on paper where a court is compelling a school district to do that. And so yes, you have great grounds to do so, and you should. It doesn't mean you're going to be listened to. Right. And so, that's where kind of the community building and solidarity piece of it comes in, because the more of you who act together, the more likely you are to be heard. But that's also where the legal aspect of it comes in, right? Because those kids who, refused to stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, well, they were just the two Quaker kids in their class, right? There weren't other kids like them. It was just them. So there was no opportunity for solidarity. They needed to go to the courts as members of, conscientiously objecting minority to get protection for their constitutional rights. And so both paths are available. I wish I could say it was just a simple matter of asking and they'll say yes. It's not. I've been doing this too long to give anybody that kind of encouragement, but it's not to say it's not worth doing. It is worth doing. It is worth having those conversations because I'll tell you, public opinion has changed on these issues. When Julie and I started doing this work in 2017, 18, the idea that your phone could be addictive in a literal way was a joke. People would joke about, oh, I'm addicted to Facebook, but they wouldn't actually believe it. But now we know that actually, they set out to like literally addict you in the same way that a casino gambler is addicted to a slot machine, and you can be. um, it's changed a lot. And the idea that we can have these, phone-free schools now in most states, we have laws in many states that are really great, these bell-to-bell phone-free policies, that again, it's not about the phone, it's not about the kid, it's about this attention mining business model that we are, not fully in control to resist. That's the problem. It's a very over inclusive solution to that problem, but it's effective. And so all that to say, ask, build your community first. Don't do those things to the exclusion of one another. And then when you're not getting the results you want, don't be afraid to think about a lawsuit as the next alternative, because and this may sound a little bit glib, but without lawsuits, the civil rights movement would have been a bunch of people who didn't get lunch and had bad seats on the bus, right? Like you have to take the next step. You have to go and say, these are my rights. I'm standing up for them, and they will be vindicated. And the only authorities we have to do that in this country are the court system.
So, talking about rights and our legal rights, a question. This is from my experience and many other people that I personally know from my district and other districts across the country. I want to know because I don't really know. We don't really, at the age of our kids, they're almost second grade and K. The kids don't bring the computers with them, the Chromebooks, etc. I don't know what's going on. I don't know what apps they're using. Perhaps some apps are mining more data. Some apps are more gamifying. We didn't even talk about the whole gamifying of education, but we'll talk about it with Emily and others. But I want to know what apps the kids are using. So far, my request was denied. I have not heard back. And I'm hearing from many parents that that is the case, that you're asking and they just won't tell you this information. So can they do it? And also, why are they not, if they don't have anything to hide, why don't they just disclose openly in the same day? Hey, of course, yeah, here, this is the apps we're using. Even, I asked additional questions, the screen time for each app, whatever. But why are they can they hold this information?
Not legally, no. You're entitled to that. I mean, you're entitled to that as a member of the public. You're entitled to that as a parent. You're entitled to that as the person who is going to be consenting to the data collection, policies from these apps. So no, it's crazy to me that it's not already existing, right? That like when you start school, that here are the 10 apps we're going to use. Here are their data privacy policies that are going to pertain for the entirety of your kids' interaction with these apps the whole school year, and you're free to take or leave them. If you don't want it, fine. Why these things have to collect information on kids at all is crazy, right? Because I don't know if you've ever seen the documentary King of Kong, but it's about the guy who got the highest score in King Kong. King Kong doesn't, or in Donkey Kong. Donkey Kong doesn't track high scores, right? There are ways to know how well someone does at something without the company making the thing knowing all that information. And so we could design EdTech in a totally different way that only teachers have this information. We're not doing any of that. And so, no, you have a right to know this stuff. And if they're not responding to your informal requests, then every state has open records laws. Some school districts are more compliant than others, but this would be another good group project, which is to just try and pry free. Just give us a complete list of the apps our kids are using in school by grade level. What are they? Start there. But it's inexcusable that this information is not already being made available to the public, and certainly isn't been made available upon request.
I'm
Um,
jumping into just to jump
sure.
in. Is this something that you see? You hear from parents that often they ask because, I mean, to me, the before opting out and doing all, this and that, the most reasonable thing is exactly what you said. What are the 10 apps? And then we can maybe ask experts to tell us, are these apps safe or not? But do you hear from other parents that it's hard for them to get the information from the school?
Oh yeah, no, this is like, I mean, the the best part of my work is that I have worked with people literally from the most elite schools in London, England, to public schools and private schools all across the United States, to schools in places like Kenya. And it's all the same experience. It's all the same experience. Nobody is doing it right. Nobody is treating parents with any level of respect in this area, which is just the respect of being upfront and saying, this is what we're using, this is why we're using it. None of that is happening really with any rigor anywhere. And I'm sure there are exceptions. I'd love to meet those school leaders who are doing that, but that's certainly not been my experience. My experience has been one of stonewalling, evasion, minimization. And so, no, it's not unique to your school district, but it is a huge problem because you deserve to know this stuff. You deserve to know. I mean, you should have this information available to you in the same way that if you asked, what's a socialist textbook that you're using? Why would they deny you that the name of that curriculum if you wanted to just see what exactly is it that my kids are learning? So that information should be available, and there's ways to get it. Like I said, through open records requests is a place to start. There's a legal mechanism there where the school has to respond to you.
But I still don't understand. The big question I have is one word. Why? If the educators feel so comfortable with the apps and they know that or they truly believe that they're good for education and they're not harmful and they feel comfortable trusting, organizations like ISTE to vet all the apps, why do they have a problem? Like, why would they have a problem? It's like I, as a physician, I always disclose anything that I do, medications, why we're giving this, why we're getting. So why do they have a problem? And again, it's not my school district. It's you're mentioning that it's literally everywhere. Why is it so hard to milk out this information? Why wouldn't they share it like openly?
I don't know. I wish I did. I think if I can speculate, I think it's a matter of resources. That they're already stretched super thin, and so responding to these requests is just one more thing. I think there is a posture of, dismissing any complaint from a parent as illegitimate. That they just hear so many complaints about so many different things that you just kind of have this defensive mechanism of you tune it all out, good or bad, valid or not. Um, and so I think there's those aspects to it. I don't know. I mean, I try, and it's not easy always, but it's like I try and retain a lot of empathy for our public servants in the school system. They're being tasked with solving societal problems without half the resources that they need to do it, and we're asking them to do way more than what they're trained to do, by and large. And so I'm very very sensitive to not being too hard on our public servants in the schools. Having said that, though, there is a limit to what's what's acceptable, and I think we've passed that, which is you at least have a right to know. You at least have a right to know what programs your kid is using and what's going on in school. And so, one really wonderful group of folks that I am familiar with and did a similar town hall like this with in upstate New York, they did open records requests. Um, for a lot of things, not only for a list of programs that were being used, but they actually asked for open records request of their school server logs, which are, the computer servers. And those showed the data flows during the day. And they showed something like 85% of the school network traffic was going to YouTube during the day, which is crazy, right? Because that's just showing that kids are sitting on YouTube all day. And so that's a way to at least get some insight into what's happening on your school servers. Now, that might be something that worked once and will never work again, which is kind of my suspicion. But there are ways to get to get under the hood here. And it shouldn't be this hard. It absolutely shouldn't be this hard. And I'm very much in agreement with you that if people are unwilling to disclose things, that means that they have something to hide. But here it's like I don't know. I don't know. And possibly it's human nature that this is a huge mistake. It isn't working out. We are very embarrassed, we're destroying education. We don't want to take, own up to our small role in that effort, as school leaders. I don't know. I don't know. But I just, I think every day is a new day. Every day is a new opportunity to do the right thing. Um, and so these are questions that should be easily answered if you're, if you ask.
So not to be too harsh on the schools also. I mean, they're working so hard and they're taking care of the most important thing in our lives, our children. But perhaps like when I'm thinking about it, again, could be our district or other districts. Perhaps one of the reasons that they are not happy to disclose is because they don't exactly know. Meaning, again, like when several people, and maybe you can tell us a little bit about this organization called IST that I asked before about, because from what I understand, it's an organization that many school districts are basically saying, well, if this app for math is approved by IST or this reading app, etc., it's okay. And maybe the schools are not vetting themselves the different apps. Maybe tell us a little bit about, and this is tied to a question of Garrett, who's talking about, listen, Google, YouTube, EdTech, Microsoft, all that. It's a trillion and trillion dollar companies and industry, including the education technology. And their goal is just to get screens and screens and, as much as possible. They're basically, even if we're not paying for Facebook or whatever, our time is the greatest resource, and they get money for our time, for capturing our time. So he says that you can't talk about all this technology without, there is some of this conspiracy theories of money has to be true. But going back to, so that's part of the question. And the other part of the question is exactly what do you think about these big organizations such as ISD as an example? Are they, legit companies that are truly doing the best, or are they contaminated by big tech money?
Um, well, I think that this is an industry that is largely, very self-interested and self-dealing. Um, there are very few truly independent groups in the space. And so without picking on any one group, and admitting that I've not done the diligence to say for sure conclusively that any is compromised, I think that this is, it's an entirely self-regulated space, which self-regulated in my mind is a much longer way of just saying unregulated. And so there is this veneer of respectability, this veneer of certification that happens. And this certification happens usually on very narrow self-serving grounds that, who knows exactly what they're saying, but it's rare that any of this is happening in a way that independent, unaffiliated researchers have looked at this software, these tools in a real world school environment, and have concluded that definitively, absolutely, these produce good educational outcomes, irrespective of the data stuff. Those types of studies are very, very, very rare. A lot of this, it's all industry funded or industry influenced in all of these ways. And to Garrett's point about being a conspiracy theorist, it's the oldest question in the book, cui bono, right? Who benefits? And looking at companies' incentives is not conspiratorial. I mean, that's capitalism, right? That's economics. It's just what are people incentivized to do? What are the costs that they're forced to absorb? And what is their behavior that's dictated by those two constraints? And here, companies are incentivized to grow and find new markets. And it's very easy to sell into a school district and suddenly have 10,000, 100,000 computers in front of, 200,000 eyeballs that you didn't have before. And as far as constraints, there's nothing stopping you. So they do that. They sell into schools, and they concoct these, you know, sales pitches to talk about why it's good, but that's really what it is. And so, there are no gatekeepers. There is nobody arbitrating here what actually is or isn't good for kids. And so I guess I've been doing this long enough that I've kind of, just started donning the tinfoil hat as part of my repertoire. But I really don't think that I'm a conspiracy theorist. I used to have to give that disclaimer a lot, which is I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but I mean, I've got these books on my shelf back here talking about, how, and these are basically manuals for software developers about how to get people to use your software more, how to manipulate their subconscious behavior so they use your stuff more. Reductively, you call that mind control, right? And that sounds super conspiratorial. Well, that's not what any of this is. This is about influencing, behavior across populations in, percentiles or points of percentiles in a way that in the aggregate benefits you, right? And so in the same way of EdTech, it's not just, well, I don't know. I guess I won't definitively say this, but I'd be surprised if they're all just cackling in their evil lair about, putting this stuff in schools and undermining public education. I think that there is, they probably to some extent believe what they're doing, but they believe what they're doing because it also serves their bottom line. And so if you look at the big names that have been behind the push toward EdTech in school, they're the CEOs of big technology companies. They're not educators, and they're not people, at least from my observation, that have a real fondness for humanity or for children. And so they're not people that I would want to outsource those decisions to. And it's not, I mean, again, it's not inaccurate, maybe it is reductive to say that Google, put Chromebooks into school to get more kids in the Google ecosystem. I feel better about saying that now because we have internal Google documents that have been released through these social media cases saying that exact thing, that they come out and say it just straight out in a way that I probably would never have believed even when I started this work several years ago. And so, some things are as simple as they seem, and a lot of it just really boils down to what are the incentives and what are the constraints. And here, every incentive is to get every single thing in front of kids, and there's very little stopping these companies. And so they do.
Great explanation. Before I take the next question of Meriwether, I think this is a really important question, and I have my pen ready, and maybe everybody can have their pen ready. Is let's say that I'm a parent, because I am a parent of kids in school, and I decide that I want to learn more. I'm not opting in, I'm not opting out, but I want to learn more about the apps that my daughter, who is currently in second grade, is getting on the Chromebook. I'm sending an email to whom? To my principal, to the school district. Who do I send it to? Like, teach us. And what do I ask? What do I ask in the email? Should I just write, I have several questions. What apps are being used? How long? What questions should we ask? And who do we address this email or phone conversation? Like, what would you suggest? Because it sounds like you're suggesting is to get more granular data before we do anything, to learn more.
Right. So it's different at every school who that person is. And, one of the things I found that's been, it's the hardest thing to do, but the most effective form of advocacy is building trusted relationships with your school leadership. It's very difficult. And so I guess the first thing I would say is consider doing it in person. Consider doing it in person with your kid's teacher. Just, if they have, and again, teachers are stretched super thin and there's 30 kids to a class, they may not have the, semester or quarterly check-ins that I remember growing up, right? Where you go and have your parent-teacher conference. But whether it's in the context of a parent-teacher conference or otherwise, trying to have that conversation. And if you can make it a conversation first, I think that's usually it's received better because you're there in the same room and they can feel you and hear you and understand you're not being hostile, right? I'm not there to be a threat to you. I'm not here to get you in trouble. I'm not here to yell at you or be mad at you. I'm just here to get information. I want to know, what my kid is using. Can you give me that information? And if you're not the person to ask, who could I ask? And so I think starting with the people you have the best relationship with, and I would suggest if your kids are young enough to have just one classroom teacher, to start with that person. If they're not, or if you're concerned about burdening that person, then depending on how your school is run, the principal or the vice principal in charge of your kid's grade is another good place to start. You can start with a counselor too. If your kid has an assigned counselor, you can talk to that person. But I think trying to find a person to have a conversation with and doing it in a way that's not confrontational and not hostile, and just trying to be as open about this as you can, which is, I have concerns about these. these platforms. I understand that it's gone for me as well.
Okay, so
Um,
I mean that's okay. So I think that for me, what is important to where I lost you, and maybe that's where we stopped, and I apologize for the technical difficulties, um, was the let's say that okay, the parents or the parents spoke with the teacher or the principal, and now it's email. What should we specifically ask for? And if you said that already, I apologize. Should
oh,
we
sure.
ask for the apps? And then the following question is, let's say that I do get eventually a list of the 10 apps. Is there any reputable source like Fairplay or others that you would recommend that we can cross-reference and make sure that these apps are, as truly educational as possible and they're safe from the privacy perspective?
Right, right. So there isn't a clearinghouse of like efficacy, right? There's nobody looking to say this is a good app. That doesn't exist, which is crazy, but that just doesn't exist. Um, as far as the data sharing piece, Internet Safety Labs, which Meriwether mentions here in one of her questions, they, to my mind, are the most reputable auditor of privacy and safety on online. And so they will go and they will see all of the data flow. They dig in very deep into these products and they observe the flow of data and where it goes, how it's being used. Sometimes they can see the actual information that's being transmitted. Other times they have to infer what it is based on the volumes. But ISL is a really great resource, at least for, is this EdTech app just a front for data mining? And a lot of services on the internet are. And there's tools where you can see for yourself. And so you can go to the ISL website, internetsafetylabs.org. They have a tool that allows you to basically do like a page X-ray um, of what information is being collected through these apps. There's another through the markup.org and then also Foo Analytics. And so you go to those websites, you drop in the URL, and you can look to see what the data flows are. I did this with my daughter yesterday. Well, actually, at her insistence, she's in fifth grade, and it's been my daughter her whole life, and so she's very attuned to these issues. Her Spanish teacher wanted her to use the Spanish dictionary that my daughter was very concerned about. Um, and so she went to this website and plunked it in, and sure enough, 170 trackers, going to all of these data mining companies, data brokers, identity resolution companies, stuff that's like pretty gross users of your data for this Spanish dictionary app for kids. So that's a place to start to show, the more of that there is, the worse the product is.
And basically, so you're saying that let's say we write and we get this information of the 10 apps that my child is using, and we find through the ISL or whatever other website that indeed some of these are not safe and a lot of the trackers. So does this arm us with more ammunition to basically go and ask the school to like what do we do with this information? What's the next step?
Well, I mean, it's a proxy for how shady the company is, right? The more type of that stuff that they do, the less invested they are in your kid's education. And this whole ed tech industry, we haven't really gotten to this, but it's built up on this totally false understanding of the law, where basically they distort a couple of these big privacy laws that the end result is they can do whatever they want. Ed tech companies can mine your kids' data however they feel like it because you know, companies can act as parents, or schools can act as parents, and companies can act as schools. And so they complete the link and cut the parent out entirely. That schools can consent as though they are parents, and data can be disclosed to these companies as though they are schools, meaning that no consent theoretically is required, and therefore they mine this some to the absolute hilt. It's hugely exploitative. It is against the law, but these companies think they're obeying the law when they do it. And so to Meriwether's other point here in the Q&A is, well, oh, they wouldn't do that. It's against the law. No, they interpret the law in a way that totally turns the law inside out, so that they justify what they think they're doing. again, you're not going to convince anybody who doesn't want to be convinced of that, but it is one more data point to show, when this company has all of these trackers in this product, who is that serving? Who is that benefiting? Because it's certainly not benefiting the kid.
Got it. So I think that we're out of time. One more minute. My last question to you, and again, apologies for the technical crash and for not getting to all the Q&A, but can people reach out to you, and how, if they have questions like the ones that I had about my school? Is it something, who would you recommend? Who is on our side to represent us? Can we
We
reach
are.
out to you
We
or
are. Yeah.
other
So
resources?
yeah, so the way that our firm works, so we are a contingency fee law firm, meaning you don't pay out of pocket to talk to us. I came to this as an activist, not as a guy who desires to own a private jet. And so you can go to our website, edtech.law, and there's a contact us form. Fill that out, and that'll put you in the queue to get on, basically get on our call list. We'll schedule a call with you and hear what your concerns are. And so we can provide resources for people who want to be better advocates, better advocate for their kids. We can also help advise you as to what your legal rights are. If you're interested in pursuing a lawsuit against either an ed tech company or potentially your school district, we can help you with that as well. If you're the parent of a kid, especially who is suffering from ADHD and who is finding the Chromebook or the iPad destroying your kid's ability to focus in school and your home life, would really like to talk to you about that as well. But there's a lot. And so if you have any concerns about this whatsoever, it doesn't cost anything to reach out. And we're happy to talk to you. And we're happy to point you in the right direction. And so I would just recommend going to our website, edtech.law. There's a contact us button. Click that, fill out the form, and then we will be in touch very soon.
This is great, Andy. I've learned so much, and I'm sure that a lot of people, I'm already getting feedback that it was a very powerful session. And again, stay tuned. In April, we're going to have 2 or 3 more sessions, and then in May, another 2. We're going to discuss different aspects of an education technology, but your experience and insights were very, very helpful. And perhaps we can have a follow-up in the future as well as things are evolving.
I would love that. I would love that. No, thank you for having me as your guest tonight. I'm very admiring of all the work you're doing and this parent group. I mean, it's community is everything. Working together is everything. And so I think if there's anything that I can leave you all with is just keep meeting, keep doing this. Try and get together in person if you can. Have a day at the park, go have a barbecue, whatever. But like have a way to continue to meet and be in community with one another and work together and try and bring the teachers in, try and bring the staff into your side, because we are all on the same side here. The people that are picking our pockets aren't the teachers making 60 grand a year. It's the guys in Silicon Valley who don't really care if our kids are doing well and send their kids to Montessori schools and Waldorf schools. And so I think you all are doing a tremendous thing. And so yeah, please don't hesitate to reach out. I'd love to come back whenever it makes sense. And thank you for your time tonight. I just so appreciate it.
All right. Well, thank you everybody for joining, and thank you so much, Andy, and everybody have a good night. The
All right,
recording will
take
be
care.
available at least until the crash.
Okay, thank you. Here.
See ya.
All right, bye bye. Take care. Bye, everybody.